Welcome back to Wall again, where passion meets music, and we have Donald Quinn back again for another album review. How are you keeping, Donald?
Oh, great, Rob. How are you?
Great to have you back on the channel. It's been way too long. We're going to review this album, so it's the Strokes' debut album. Is this it? So yeah, I remember when this album was released, Donald. I was in college at the time, or just going into college. I think it was July of 2001. It was released just before 9/11, and we might talk about that
Mm,
later on in relation to one of the tracks. But
yeah.
yeah, at the time, music was in a very weird place at the time. Um, Oasis were on the way down. They had released
hmm
"Standing on the Shoulders of Giants" the year before, and it was a complete flop, like a fail. And people had felt that all that Britpop, all that great guitar music that came out in the 1990s with Blur, Oasis, Pulp, Cast, all that kind of stuff had kind of gone
Yeah.
away, and there
Yeah.
wasn't there wasn't really a lot happening guitar wise in the charts and
No.
stuff. And then of course, within the space of about a year, we had this fantastic album by the Strokes. We also had stuff from a band called the White Stripes. The Kings of Leon would release their debut album shortly after that, a year or two after that.
Yeah.
We had other bands like Divines, and then you had bands like Razorlight, and Kaiser Chiefs then when
Arctic
all that came
Monkeys.
on. Arctic Monkeys obviously 2006.
Yeah.
So, but I feel around this time, like the Strokes, particularly the Strokes and the White Stripes, American bands coming over to Europe and really turning things upside down around that
Guitar
time.
music was guitar music was not popular. So Britpop, like what you were saying, Britpop had come and gone. The only kind of guitar type bands in the charts was like Coldplay and Travis, Stereophonics, kind of middle of the road. And then in America, it was like, kind of that punk pop
Blink
rap type thing
182,
with
Green Day.
Blink 182, Green Day, your
Then you
man,
had the new metal. Then you had,
Limp Bizkit,
yeah, Limp Bizkit,
new
Korn.
metal. Yeah, so like guitar music was not really happening, and then yeah, they just kind of came out of nowhere and exploded it again. Really, then they created a new rock revolution, is what the magazines were calling it at the time.
Oh, big time, without a doubt.
Yeah,
So they came from New York,
anyway,
didn't they?
New York, yeah. They all met kind of through school, and they'd very kind of, impressive backgrounds. Their guitarist Albert Hammond Jr., his father was, world-renowned artist Albert Hammond, who had written for a lot of huge artists and had his own songs. Julian Casablancas, his father founded Elite Modeling Agency. He was almost, borderline billionaire probably. And the other two guys is similar. They had this reputation as being really rich kids, and I suppose no, I don't think that did them any favors. But they had a lot of press before their music really came out. They looked amazing, had a lot of hype and magazine coverage, press coverage before the album or any music really came out. But luckily, they had the album to back up all of that hype.
Yeah,
And yeah, so they all met in school in New York, and um
they're all from
yeah,
like
went to
European families, weren't they? So like,
yeah,
um, so the drummer Fab Moretti and was it the guitar player Nick Valencia? They're both of Italian descent.
Italian and Brazilian and French and
Yeah, and
like
Nikolai, he was of Greek descent, wasn't he?
yeah, I think Russian as well.
Okay, and
That
Julian,
name Nikolai,
Spanish was he?
Spanish, and his mother's Danish.
Yeah.
A
Wow, there's a lot of
Danish, yeah.
different cultures there.
Mm,
They were coming with into this
hmm
band, and yeah, you're right. Like they did come across a little bit as, I suppose, privileged to a point, but as you say, you can't argue with the music.
No, not at all.
I remember the
And I
video
don't,
for last night when that was released, like that was everywhere. It was all over the place. And I remember, as you rightly say, like Blink 182 had the video for all the small things, and it was like a piss take video, and they had like pink guitars and they were running
yeah,
around in the nip and running around in their boxers and all this type of stuff.
yeah,
And then the total opposite to that was the Strokes, who were just coming out
mm,
dressed like they were from the 1970s, from the New York scene, you know,
hmm,
down at Greenwich Village or somewhere.
yeah,
They looked cool, as you say. Very simple setup: two guitars, a bass, and drums. No keyboards,
hmm,
no fancy stuff. And their album sounded like that. It sounded raw.
yeah,
There was no tricks, no studio tricks, or Now I know Julian, a very unique singer, and he lent into the effects like vocal distortion and chorus and the way he even sang. There was nothing else like that on the radio at that time.
yeah. So on that vocal effect, there's a great story there. The producer, um, Gordon Raphael,
Hmm.
they put him on the album cover as well as, just a great kind of nod to him, like giving him props. So if you look at the album sleeve, they have all the people involved in the making of the records. So they kind of gave them a shout out, as it were. But he produced an unknown guy, um, but with the vocal effect, he would say that Julian would you know, kind of describe what he wanted, not in technical terms, but in kind of like poetic terms. And the producer had to kind of decipher. So he'd say, I want the vocals to sound like, your favorite pair of jeans. They're not brand new, but uh, they're not in tatters either. They're kind of just they're comfortable, slightly worn. So with the vocals, they didn't want a clean sound, but they didn't want to completely kind of distort it either. So just a slight comfortable distortion on it. And that's how he would kind of go on in the studio. He'd kind of speak in those kind of terms to get his points across. He wouldn't use technical terms, and frustrating very much so at times, but very interesting. You can kind of
Yeah.
understand what he's saying by that analogy.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about the album cover because this is actually quite an interesting story, isn't it? So maybe you
Yeah.
probably know a lot more about the album covers than me.
Yeah. So the album cover, the black glove, yeah. That is the photographer's girlfriend. So his name's Colin Lane, and he's on Instagram. And he's selling all those portraits and that artwork and that photography of the Strokes is like selling for a lot of money nowadays. Like 20 years on, it's kind of become very valuable. But he shot those a few different kind of versions of that in his apartment of his girlfriend, and the Strokes were friends with him, I think, and they liked the one with the glove. But for some reason, that wasn't released in America. That album cover was only released in Europe, maybe for taste reasons, something they didn't release it in America.
Censorship. I
They
think
released
American
censorship. Yeah,
censorship is a lot of it's a higher standard or
yeah,
more of a blockage, more of an obstacle than it
yeah.
is in Europe. So that was the reason.
So
And to be honest, like the cover they used in America was like a blue cover with this kind of like
the
calligraphy.
Big Bang, isn't it?
It,
Something
it
like
is
that.
it. It's yellow. I don't know. I'll have to look at it again, but it's an iconic cover as well. Like
Yeah,
that
it looks
cover
great.
will regularly come up in like articles or when they talk about like iconic album covers. But
Yeah,
the European one is probably the more iconic one. But
yeah,
yeah, like imagine that, like the band, it's one album, and then they've got like
yeah,
two iconic covers depending on what part of the
yeah,
world you're
yeah.
in. But
They always choose great
beautiful.
artwork. I love the artwork.
Mm. Very, yeah, they're artistic, all right. There's no doubt about
Great
that.
imagery.
So, do you want to jump into the tracks?
Go for it. Yeah. Track
So we
number one.
track number one is the title track, isn't it?
Is this it?
Is this it? Very mellow song,
Of all,
actually.
yeah,
Very,
it reminds me of the Pixies.
yeah,
That lead guitar parts reminds me a little bit of the Pixies. Where is my mind?
yeah, yeah,
And that little sound at the intro, the start of the song. I've always wanted it's like a reversed kind of sound effect. Sound
that's right.
effects. Love that sound and really sets the tone for the album. It's kind of like retro futuristic kind of sound. Something
Yeah,
you'd never heard before. Sets the tone. Um, yeah, and just a kind of a lazy vocal delivery.
very much so.
Um, the Arctic Monkeys have covered that song at gigs as well.
Brilliant.
I was at the Arctic Monkeys gig in 2018. They covered it. Um, love the song.
Yeah.
Great
Oh,
way
yeah.
to introduce the album.
Very
Brave way. Like it's
unusual
not. Mm,
because, like, you
they
would have
haven't.
thought, like last night is probably the standout single, if you could call it that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like a lot of bands would start the album with the single,
yeah.
But the Strokes decided not to do that. They went this way, and it's a funny song. Is this it? I don't know. Is it a happy song or a sad song? Like if you think about it, if you're in a happy mood and you're listening to it, it can be a happy song. Then if you're in a
Yeah,
pisser and you're listening to it, it can also be a sad
yeah,
song. So I think it's one of
yeah,
those songs. It's got major and minor parts, but I just think, as
yeah.
you say, like with the vocal delivery and the guitar licks, it can be whatever you want it
He
to be.
he he comes across as nonchalant, drunk, tired,
Yeah,
which was a very sort of cool approach to take with vocals and the lyrics.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a kind of almost like an anti kind of performance,
yeah.
almost
Absolutely.
not want, not almost not wanting to be there,
Yeah.
which kind of you know, they kind of made an effort they worked hard to make it sound like they weren't trying. So it
Yeah.
sounds like he's not trying, but they've obviously put the work in to make it sound like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look
Number,
for me, the album really starts with the modern age. That's when we kick in.
yeah,
Like a lot
yeah.
of albums will have like an intro. I know the Foo
Hmm.
Fighters used to do it on albums and Jane's Addiction and stuff like that. But to me, that's like the intro track. Now the album
Hmm.
starts with the modern age, and now we're cooking. Now we're really seeing what the
Yeah.
band is about. We've got a good tempo there, great guitar work by the
It's
lads.
it's a very simplistic riff, just on the D,
Yeah,
but brilliant, like completely classic sound. Not doing anything major. The solo was great.
yeah, so it's
Um,
brilliant.
it's the their EP, the thing, the song really, or the EP that kind of sparked it for them was called the Modern Age EP,
Yeah,
which that song was taken from, and they got signed based on the back of that kind of badly recorded EP with the Modern Age on it, with maybe Last Night on it,
yeah,
and another track. But yeah, Jeff Travis, the the owner of Rough Trade Records in England, was sent that or came across it and just signed them off the back of it. Brought them over to from New York to London off the back of the EP. Unknown band,
yeah,
and put them on a British tour, but based off that song basically.
yeah. Oh yeah, you can see why. It's very strong.
Yeah.
And then it goes into Soma, which I think is another great song. Absolutely brilliant.
Mm,
A great riff, just like building up. It's in the three steps, very simple as you said, but
yeah.
very effective. And one thing I love about the
Yeah.
Strokes is like they have two guitar players. So they've got Nick Valenci. He was usually playing like a Gibson, like an
Hmm.
ES 335 or something, and then you had Albert Hammond Jr. usually playing a Fender Stratocaster. Two completely
Yeah.
different sounding guitars. They'd have one pan hard right, one pan hard left, and they would play the songs so that they weren't crowding each other out. They played different
Mm,
parts, and they were very focused on like the rhythm, but also on groove and um staying in their own lane. So a lot of the time, Albert Hammond will like play with a like very sharp kind of funk flick, but he'll play it like on eight notes with the drummer. He'll make sure he's not getting in the way of anything else. And then Nick Valenci was great at riffs. Like I think Nick
yeah.
Valenci was probably heavily influenced by the 1970s rock thing. Maybe people like Mark Bolan, T Rex, stuff like that. I get the impression he would have been influenced by that kind of a vibe, you know?
Mm. Like syncopated guitars.
Yeah,
So isn't it amazing how Julian wrote everything? He wrote all the, those first two albums, he wrote up every piece of music for the Strokes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did, yeah. And he wrote the solos
Does he play
and
guitar?
guitar. Yeah, he does, yeah.
Well, he
So
wrote all the
he
songs, he
wrote
wrote all the
wrote
instrumentation,
absolutely, yeah.
and just got
So
the
he
guys to
studied
play it,
music,
yeah.
yeah. But they obviously brought their own, like they would have brought their own flair to Albert Hammond.
Yeah.
Jr. has a certain flair and a
Oh,
style of
for
playing,
sure. For sure.
and he's tone obsessed. So he brings that to it. But those first two albums, Julian wrote everything. But he studied musical theory, and I think that has kind of contributed to the two styles of guitar. Like they're not crowding each other out. They're complementing each other. One's playing maybe a lower scale, and the other's playing the same kind of thing on a higher scale. I haven't studied musical theory, obviously, so I'm kind of getting myself into murky waters trying to explain it. But basically, they're complementing each other theoretically, in
Yeah.
theory wise, and rhythmically as well. But just on the tangent, I think what happened then was after the first two albums, I think power dynamics shifted and the other guys wanted more of an involvement in the writing process. And I think it just fell apart then. I don't
Okay.
really like much after the first two albums, aside from the last album,
Yeah.
which I really like.
Okay.
The New Abnormal, but that's a conversation for another day.
Definitely. Definitely.
Track
And then
four,
yeah, barely legal, yeah. Um again, like I don't think there's a bad song from here on. You know, they're all very catchy. They're
yeah,
essentially pop songs written with guitars, but they're not pop songs written with guitars in the way Blink 182 would do it, which another band I really like, but Blink 182 will they'll overlayer stuff really subtly and they'll produce the hell out of it. Certainly, from their third or fourth album on, they had a producer called Jerry Finn, and they would do a lot of stuff
yeah,
with harmonies and keyboards, and they'd overlayer guitars, and everything would be very polished and clean. It was pop music, but it was
mm,
clean, but with guitars. This isn't clean.
hmm,
They've purposely left this as a gritty, dirty record. It kind of sounds like a demo,
yeah,
um, but still brilliant. It still works so well.
yeah, like lo-fi production. I think at the time, similar to nowadays, like a lot of bands were going for that slick production thing. Like, technology was becoming more was becoming more evolved and developing a lot and becoming more of a thing in music as well. And people were just embracing technology and production techniques and making it sound as good as they could, making it sound slick. And I think the Strokes wanted to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So
Yeah.
not a slick production, trashy kind of like badly recorded Velvet Underground style. The way the Velvet Underground was so terribly produced, and but that was intentional. I think it was that kind of a vibe. And also the producer that they used, he would have been an unknown. and I think they tried a few different producers on the first album, but I think they didn't like the big slick professional studio. They preferred your man's kind of lo-fi approach, and um, yeah, it kind of stood out for those reasons because it was, you know, charmingly different.
Absolutely. And there's even like an argument where if they had gone with a slick production, this album could have gone under the radar, you know,
Yeah,
but
they
it
did. They
didn't
started this.
because it was different.
Yeah,
And that's interesting. You mentioned the Velvet Underground and like obviously Lou Reed is another artist who I'm assuming was a big influence on Julian
I mean,
Casablancas.
yeah, he's huge. Like he is his main influence.
Yeah, yeah, I would have
Yeah,
thought so. Yeah, certainly with the it's almost like an anti-rock star purposely not trying, purposely trying to
yeah.
just underplay the whole time. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, look, it works. I suppose that brings us on to the hit last night. So what's your thoughts on that song? Because we played this song in a cover band for many years.
Yeah, it is the song that, and I know this sounds dramatic, changed my life or changed the course of my interests and hobbies and all that. I remember the first time I heard it, wasn't particularly into music. Appreciated, liked a good whatever chart song, but I heard that in the back of a car. I even remember where it was going, and I just thought it just sounded so different. Probably for those reasons mentioned earlier, production wise, catchy, poppy, but like sounding like something from the past, not current. Um, and I just kept my ear out for it again, and it was at a time where you tape stuff off the radio. So the next time I heard it, I taped it, and then um, my sister got me. It's just noticed me taping speaking about that band, they're kind of showing an interest, and she got me the album for that following Christmas. But what my thoughts on it? Yeah, just amazing. Like the perfect band. Really, that video kind of shows that where it pans across to each member of the band. They all look amazing. It's like a boy band in rock form. It's got a classic sound. Um, a bit like he was kind of being, I don't know, tagged as maybe borrowing heavily from Tom Petty, American Girl, for that song.
You took the
But I
words
still
right
think
out of my mouth there. Um,
yeah,
and to be honest, the Tom Petty
but I don't
reference.
think there's any harm in it.
Oh, I love Tom Petty, so definitely no
Yeah.
harm in that. But I
Mm,
think when you mentioned Tom Petty, it was funny there. You're talking about like the musical borrowing, but I think
mm,
in the video for last night, if you ever go back and look at some of the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers um music videos from the 1970s, they're pretty cringe, but that's exactly where he's pulling from. It's just five guys playing in a room and no like big
yeah,
effects. It's all very stripped down,
yeah.
and like
Live.
live as well. And the thing is,
Mm,
like when they were recording that video, Julian's like he's all over the place. He's trying to
yeah,
be like very um I don't know, confused or whatever,
yeah.
looking a bit worse for wear, should we say?
Drunk. Yeah,
Yeah, and he falls into so there's two overhead mics that are picking up the drum kit, and he falls
yeah,
into one of the overhead mics and it lands on the cymbal. And Fab is there playing the drum solo, but there's a little break after the guitar solo, and Fab just gets the chance to get his stick and tap the mic, the overhead mic that had collapsed onto the cymbal, just taps it 3 or 4 times and it falls off on the ground, and they keep going. And it's just if you planned that,
yeah,
it wouldn't have
yeah.
happened. But it
Mm,
happened in the studio, and I can imagine the Strokes were like, "Oh, leave that in, that'd be amazing."
yeah,
You
definitely.
know, you could have the
Cut that bit.
music,
No, leave that bit in. Cut the other stuff out.
cut the other stuff out. Exactly, yeah, David Brent. Um, but no, like you can imagine a director saying, "Oh, we have to take this again. We have to do this again." and the lads are
Yeah.
like, no, no, we're keeping that in. That's going to be
Mm,
something that stands out.
mm.
So the perfection of imperfection, I suppose,
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
definitely.
And the guitar solo
And
in
I
that
think,
song absolutely rips. It's
doesn't it?
so
It's
it's
amazing.
so good.
It's very 70s, but
Yeah,
with that kind of a music, or it's just a performance video, and you're just singing at the mic, it's hard to make it interesting. So I like the way he has kind of just, performed a little bit. He's over and back the stage. He's doing this and that and the other.
yeah.
Julian,
He's
they have that
disorientated.
kind of,
That's the word I was looking
yeah,
for. Disorientated.
yeah,
He's like, yeah,
and yeah, it just makes for more of an interesting performance,
yeah. It's a great
and it
video, and
did very well. It did very, very well on MTV.
yeah, catapulted that band into the limelight.
Hmm.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
And just then,
I think it
a
was
co-
directed. I think it was directed by Roman Coppola.
oh, Francis Ford Coppola's son, is it?
Yeah, I
Wow.
think so. Yeah,
So
yeah, it was a
the Godfather
big
director's
name
son.
director on their first two, a lot of the videos in the first two albums.
Cool. Very good.
Mm,
Very good. So we should probably talk about the song New York City Cops. So, again, another great song. Tongue in
mm,
cheek lyrics, New York City Cops, they ain't too smart. But
yeah,
as we said earlier, this album was released in July of 2001. And unfortunately, only a couple of months later, we had that terrible 9/11 tragedy that happened in New York
yeah,
City, Twin Towers.
mm,
So after that point, any albums that were pressed, they had replaced New York City Cops with another song in the US. So if you go and
when
buy,
it started,
was that the song?
yeah,
Very good. I knew you'd know that.
sounded like a demo. Never really fitted. I liked it.
Yeah,
Didn't think it fitted. Didn't think it fitted in. Yeah, it just sounded like a demo. It didn't sound as strong as the other ones.
yeah. So it's amazing because over the course of 4 years there, you've got three versions of this album. So someone like you who's a massive Strokes fan, there's three
Yeah,
versions out there. There's Is This It
yeah,
European Edition 2001. Then there's
hmm
Is This It the American version with the different cover
yeah.
uh 2001. And then if you go and buy, I think they remastered or repressed 2003, there'll be the US version from 2003 with a different cover without New York City Cops
New
and
York City
including that
cops.
song you just mentioned. So
Yeah, yeah,
something for collectors there. But
yeah, yeah.
what would you give
Which one
this
have you
album?
got?
I don't have any. I don't have
Don't have
any.
any.
I
I'll give
have.
you a loan of mine.
You probably have a number of copies, do you?
I've the I've the European edition
Yeah,
that my sister got me for Christmas in 2002.
brilliant.
So yeah, out of 10, I have to say 10, man.
Yeah,
It's my favorite album of all time.
yeah,
I don't think there is I every song, big fan of every song. Um, I can't really fault any. It's not. I can't really fault anything on it.
fair play, fair play.
I do.
I
I've one fault
go for it.
that it isn't. There aren't more tracks.
Well, it's a short album. It's only 36 minutes, which
Yeah,
was amazing back at that time, Donald, because CD
yeah,
was so popular. That was like the most popular year on record for CD sales
mm,
worldwide, and people were trying to push as much music onto a CD as possible
mm,
because they weren't restricted with. Well, you could put 74 to 77 minutes of music on a CD, so
yeah,
it was great. I would say the Strokes were saying, no, we want this the same length that a vinyl would have been back in the 70s. So it's 36 minutes. It's going to be like an old school vinyl. Even
yeah.
though
Wow.
vinyl wasn't out in the early 2000s,
Yeah,
it had been dormant at that stage. But
yeah.
in my opinion, 45 minutes,
What
anything
you
longer than
what are you
that,
saying?
it's too long. For
What are you
for
saying? What would your review of it be?
my ranking.
Yeah.
So back when it came out, I would have had it ranked very highly. It was a massive influence on me at the time when we were getting a band together, um, back in the early 2000s, and learning guitar and all that. It was a huge album for me. I listened to it a number of times today, just preparing for this, and I have to say,
Yeah.
I don't think it's aged as well as other albums for me. Yeah, controversial, but I suppose that
In what regard?
um, so like the production is raw and it is what it is, but it does seem like dated to that time, what they were doing at that time.
Yeah.
Um, I think maybe some of the tracks aren't as strong. I think there are strong tracks on it, and then there are
Mm,
middling tracks. Um, so I just think with time, like this has actually happened to me the opposite way around, where albums I thought were just okay, like years
mm,
back, and then more recently they've been, I've listened to them with a fresh pair of ears, and it might come
yeah.
back again in another 5 or 10 years. I might think this album is the best thing
Yeah.
since sliced bread
Yeah.
again. But bearing
Mm,
that in mind, no, I'd have to give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's still a
yeah.
very strong album, but
Yeah.
it's not something I'd be listening to often. So yeah, really enjoyed diving into that album there, Donald. The Strokes, Is This It? Their debut album.
Yeah.
So let us know in the comments what you think of the album. Would you give it a 10 out of 10 like Donald, or would you be a bit more critical like me, maybe, or grumpy like me? Let us know in the comments, and if you like the video, stick a like
Um,
on it and subscribe. Right, okay, take it easy.